And will be recorded and subsequently broadcast. Start by taking apologies. I've received two, one from Kate Nicholl and one from Sinead McLaughlin. Happy to note any others. None at this stage. Declarations of interest, members? None. Chairperson's business. Item 3.1, members, is just an informal meeting that I undertook with the Minister on Monday in advance of her progress update on her proposals for the Good Jobs Bill. As members will see from the note and subsequent oral statement that the Minister made, the Minister has yet to receive either policy approval or indeed approval for the bill through the Executive, so the Committee at this stage will be unaware of when or if the bill will ever arrive with the Committee. Do members have any questions about that at this stage, Jonathan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and I thought your points were very valid in the Chamber. I suppose I was a bit surprised at what's appeared to be significant progress from the Minister's perspective in this regard, given the concerns that we had heard from the business community in general, and that was overlapping on a number of issues. And I'm just wondering if there is a way in which we can further explore some of those business concerns, because obviously they're going to have to be key in terms of this, whatever the pathway looks going forward. But I don't believe that the statement set out any detail as to what engagement they had from them, or indeed what concerns were alleviated by the Minister's statement. I certainly didn't pick that up.
I suppose because there's been no formal executive approval for either policy intent or for a bill, the Committee wouldn't be able to do any formal consultation or scrutiny at this stage. We may at some stage wish to look at doing some pre-scrutiny, but we may then wish to wait until a policy decision is or isn't taken by the Executive, and then the Committee stage, I assume, will be a pretty lengthy process should it ever arrive at that.
Would have thought so. Also, Chairperson Ray's Assembly Research will brief us in about 2 weeks' time on the situation in Scotland, Republic of Ireland, GB with their new bill, and then the Minister's bill, and just to compare and contrast and see how different or how similar they all are, and then members can take a view then about what pre-legislative scrutiny they wish to do, because you're free. The committee is completely free to take whatever evidence it wants, and it's no bad thing to inform yourselves of what will be a lengthy and pretty complex bill, lots and lots of things in it. So maybe you put a pin in that for maybe 2 weeks until Reyes comes.
I got the impression the Minister has said that she would be undertaking further consultation. I'd just like more detail on what that is, that we can be clear. Because, as Jonathan said, there is a feeling in the business community that there wasn't sufficient consultation or awareness of this. Indeed, I was with a major company yesterday and they weren't fully over it either, so there are implications. Thank you.
Yep. So right to the department in those terms. Is that okay?
Yeah. On the back of that, is it possible for us as a committee to ascertain who the department exactly have consulted, a list? Because I think that could be telling as well before we would go into any form of consideration ourselves.
David, anything you want to add, Chief?
No, that's
happy enough.
That's agreed.
Agreed?
Yep.
Okay. Draft minutes then, members, are at page 7 of our pack and reflect our deliberations on the 9th of April. Are members content that they are a true and accurate record of that meeting? Is that agreed? Agreed? Yeah. Matters arising, members, then, are there anything in those minutes members wish to raise at this stage? If not, we move to item 6, Ulster University Economic Policy Centre Management and Leadership. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Karen Bonner back. Karen's a familiar face with the committee. As members will be aware, she's the principal economist at the centre, and she's going to give members an overview of management and leadership in Northern Ireland SMEs. I'll refer members to page 31 and to page 115 of our pack. But with that, very happy to hand over to you. And Karen, thank you for coming down here. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair, for your invitation to discuss management and leadership in Northern Ireland with your committee, and good morning, everyone. To start, I would like to pass on the apologies of my colleague Gareth Hetherington. He was keen to attend, but unfortunately has an urgent family matter to attend to, and he does look forward to future evidence sessions with the committee. So I have a short opening statement outlining some key comments and observations from our recent report on management and leadership training in Northern Ireland SMEs, which hopefully helps to inform your work. So management and leadership, while closely related and often used interchangeably, serve different purposes within a business or organisation. Management is process-oriented and focuses on planning, organising and coordinating resources to achieve specific goals efficiently. Leadership, on the other hand, is people-focused and about inspiring, guiding and influencing people towards a shared vision. In SMEs in particular, these roles often overlap. Management and leadership skills are widely recognised as crucial to improving business performance. Evidence shows that effective management leads to improved sales, profitability, employee engagement and resilience. There is also a strong link between management skills and productivity improvements. Better trained managers are thought to adopt good management practices, which in turn helps to improve productivity. These good management practices encompass strategic, operational and human resource approaches that support effective decision-making and organisational performance. They include elements such as decision-making, target setting and employee training and incentive systems. Together, these practices foster structure, efficiency and a motivated workforce, and it has been shown that a very small improvement in management practices is associated with a disproportionate increase in productivity. In Northern Ireland, evidence points to managers being less well trained and less likely to adopt good practices compared to their UK peers. The region also has a higher share of low qualified managers. Around half of managers in Northern Ireland are qualified to degree level, which is no different to the UK, but 1/5 are qualified to the equivalent of 1 GCSE and below, compared to 16% in the UK. Northern Ireland also sits at the bottom of the UK regional league table on management practice scores. So despite strong evidence that management and leadership development boosts business performance, management and leadership training is generally under-prioritised by businesses. While most managers receive some form of training over the course of a year, less than half receive specific training on managing and leading. Furthermore, this uptake declines significantly as firm size falls. For example, just 1/5 of businesses with 2 to 4 employees provide management training, compared to 3/4 of businesses with 250 or more employees. And we know that the Northern Ireland business population is dominated by such micro firms. In addition to training for managers, only 1/3 of Northern Ireland's businesses reported providing management and leadership training to employees. This is significant as it can lead to what has been termed the accidental manager, whereby individuals are promoted into management roles due to proficiency in their existing role, but without appropriate management training. Indeed, the main causes of skills gaps in managers is identified as being new to the role or having partial training. So despite survey evidence showing a minority of businesses engaging with formal management and leadership training, the consultation that we undertook with SME managers reveals a more nuanced picture. In fact, there is more widespread uptake of informal learning rather than formal training. On-the-job training, self-directed learning, use of mentors and sector-specific coaching were among the methods used by SME managers actively seeking ways to upskill or address management challenges. This organic approach reflects the resourcefulness that characterise many smaller firms, fulfilling their upskilling needs based on their constraints. The idea of doing nothing in terms of training or upskilling was rare, and mostly due to lack of awareness of need rather than unwillingness. Interviews with business leaders, including those engaged in formal training and more informal methods, highlighted the power of better trained managers. Improved confidence, sharper decision-making and forward-thinking leadership were some of the benefits. Importantly, it wasn't just about benefiting the individual. It was also seen to enhance team performance, support innovation and foster stronger business culture, while also adding value in terms of productivity, financial performance, growth and in reputational terms. Despite the benefits of training, barriers do remain. Cost, time pressures and a lack of awareness about available training opportunities were the main constraints identified. Lack of budget and capital for training was a particular barrier in terms of engaging with formal management leadership training, particularly given the preference for face-to-face training. Such training enables benefits beyond the course content, such as peer learning and networking opportunities, but there was a recognition that this type of training is more costly. Given financial constraints, the concern was also about achieving value for money and targeted help, with tailored rather than one-size-fits-all training identified as being more beneficial. Subsidisation of training was welcome, but there was general scepticism about fully subsidised training, with perceptions of generic content which would be less useful. The lack of time to enable managers or other employees out of the business to attend formal training was also one of the main barriers to take up, and a reason for the use of internal training methods. This was particularly the case for micro firms, for whom time away from the business is much more difficult to manage. Our research also highlighted a lack of awareness of training provision. Even amongst those that were engaging with external providers, there was little knowledge of the breadth of training available. Inaccessible language was also identified as a barrier, with the need for training providers to use language and terms that resonates with businesses. Chair, my final comments relate to the recommendations arising from our study. While the quantitative data suggests low rates of formal management leadership training uptake, the qualitative findings revealed widespread informal methods. Therefore, many SMEs are building management capacity despite systemic barriers. But given the variety of methods used, it's difficult to assess the collective impact on the economy and the extent to which full potential is being achieved. But improved coordination and accessibility of training and associated support could enhance uptake and business outcomes significantly. We have five recommendations arising from our report, and very briefly, they are the provision of a centralised training information portal, which would be a single hub with a diagnostic tool, course listings and testimonials. Secondly, although not a devolved instrument, a skills tax credit similar to R&D tax credits, which would provide tax relief for internal and external management leadership training modelled on international practices. Thirdly, a formal mentor directory which would provide accessible mentor lists outside of structured programmes to support micro and smaller entities. Fourthly, improved communication and accessibility, which would include the use of more relatable business language in training content and promotion, and ensure access to training is available across Northern Ireland. And fifthly, encourage SMEs to track and evaluate training effectiveness and business impact. Chair, a final remark that I will make is that Northern Ireland's SME managers appear eager to learn, but we need to dismantle the barriers that are holding them back. To be clear, we do not seem to have a problem with the supply of programmes, rather there is a lack of demand. Therefore, with the right structures, incentives and information in place to support training and upskilling, we can mobilise manager demand, including those who haven't or don't typically engage. In doing so, the region can foster confident, capable leaders with the skills to drive their businesses forward, which will help to support a more productive, resilient economy. Thank you.
Karen, thank you so much for that. If I could just pick up on a couple of points. Firstly, just in relation to your remarks about management practice scores and Northern Ireland ranking within the UK, how is that scored, or what's the measure that's used to define somebody who's good or not at management practice?
Yes, so there's a survey that the Office of National Statistics have undertaken for quite a number of years now. Previously, it was only run in Great Britain, and Northern Ireland was excluded from the survey. Okay. And a number of years ago, researchers at Queen's did a pilot based on the same questions in Northern Ireland. And after the publication of those results, Northern Ireland has subsequently been included in the wider UK survey. So what they do is they ask about different management practices around things like target setting, employee training, employee benefits and rewards, and a range of other practices, and the results of those are scored, and when all the results are combined together, you get an overall score. So the closer to 1 the score is, it means that you're very well developed management practices. The closer to 0, the poorer your management practices. And then when the Northern Ireland results are combined and compared to other parts of the UK, so we've only 1 year so far, I think, where Northern Ireland has been included in that wider UK study, and based on those results, Northern Ireland came out bottom.
Okay, that makes sense. And Given the prevalence and the importance of micro and businesses and SMEs to the Northern Ireland economy, the economic vision set out by the previous minister and then obviously continued by Minister Archibald, did you see anything in that economic vision and 4 pillars that addresses this important issue?
I think so. I think there is within the department, they understand the importance of management leadership training. They did welcome the report, and they had both ourselves and the researchers from Queen's to do a joint seminar to the department on management and leadership training. I think within the vision there is a recognition that, particularly in terms of the productivity pillar, and also around the Minister's priority for good jobs, that management and leadership training is really essential for that, because the training itself doesn't just improve manager skills, but it's also seen to improve employee retention, employee training, and therefore there's wider benefits for employees as well as I said, the managers themselves.
And then finally, just from me, obviously, the Lions review into the Invest NI highlighted some concerns about the support for Indigenous businesses. Do you think that Invest NI, through its restructuring and new management, has an important role to play in supporting businesses, in particular our micro and SMEs, with management support and training?
Yes, I think so. When we did the consultations with the SMEs, some of them had indicated, for example, that there was maybe elements of Invest NI schemes around management and leadership training that they may have wanted to avail of either the whole training programme or an element of it, but you had to become an Invest NI client first, and they maybe didn't meet the thresholds to become an Invest NI client. So in a way that they were sort of locked out of being able to access the training. So I do think if there is a move towards a broadening of the support base, and that it's not necessarily always restricted to sort of the top performing businesses, and that at least some of the elements are more spread out across those wider micro and SMEs, I think that would be welcome, especially if there was, obviously I get budget constraints, but if there was a loosening of criteria where more of those micro businesses could avail of some of that really targeted, tailored business support, especially around management and leadership, I think that would be welcome.
Useful. Okay, thank you so much. I'm just going to open up to the colleagues now. Padraig?
Thanks very much for your presentation. I thought it was really useful, and I should declare an interest at the start. I actually did a skill-up course on productivity and on management because it obviously falls under our brief, and it was an area, to be honest, I didn't know too much about before doing that, and that was the reason that I undertook the course, and I thought it was really, really useful and gave me a better insight into it. I think you've raised a huge number of really important points and points that we should take away from today. But for me, just a few questions around, so one of the ideas that you'd mentioned was around the portal, and I think it was really important that you mentioned as well about it not being generic. So in terms of that portal, is there an ability to augment that and to, I suppose, continue to increase that to make sure that it's business specific? So if I'm in hospitality, that there's specific productivity, leadership and management practices that are different in hospitality compared to construction or other sectors?
Yeah, definitely. So the idea behind the portal, I suppose it came, when we spoke to the businesses and we asked them, where are you finding out information about courses, or how would they best be promoted to you? And I think everybody gave us a different answer. So what worked for one doesn't work for the other. But what became really clear is that they don't have time to sit and Google, every course that's available, and whether they're eligible for it, how much it costs, is it tailored, and whatever else. So the idea behind the portal was that you'd have all the information in one place, and we also recommend a diagnostic, because I think as well there's a lot of people don't know what they don't know. So if you're able to fill out some sort of questionnaire and it maybe points you towards, well, you could improve in this area and here's courses that are relevant to this, or if you're in hospitality, then here's management and leadership courses specifically designed for that sector. So the idea behind it was that it would be very informative, all in the one place, easy to access, and businesses could then decide if they're signposted on to relevant courses, they could then decide to go, whether they wanted to go ahead with it, rather than them having to search through tons and tons of different websites and different pages.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant, and it's really good that that's been put in place, I suppose, from the get-go in the suggestion as well. Because one of the points that you mentioned on there was around businesses not having time to do that. And that was something we'd certainly heard a lot. And also the point around tax, that they were worried about the financial implications, particularly family businesses, small businesses, as you've mentioned. So in terms of that then, what do you think the best way to support those businesses is? Because I'm conscious of there is obviously a higher lack of that in family businesses, in smaller businesses. How do we get to the businesses that aren't maybe willing to do this, not willing to do this, but maybe aware of the opportunities, and how do we reach them? Because a lot of the businesses we spoke to, and I'm sure there's a huge overlap between R&D, which you've mentioned, they're saying, we're kind of locked out of R&D because we're not big enough, and we don't really have potential to grow hugely. What we do well. So is there a correlation there? And if so, how do we reach those businesses who either are locked out, or maybe they perceive that this isn't for them?
Yeah, I think that's an issue. We didn't get any sense that anyone was hesitant or reluctant to train. It's just, again, maybe they didn't know that they needed it, or, as I said, they didn't know where to get the training. I think what also came across really strongly in the report was that word of mouth and their own networks is really powerful. So I think actually to try and engage those who maybe hadn't thought of it, it's actually testimonials from their peers or other businesses, either local to them or in their sector, that can say, I did this training course, here's what it led to, or here's what changes I was able to do. So I think because a lot of this is about changing behaviours, it's more difficult. I mean, there's also issues around, as I said, them not having the time and the cost, so they're big factors, but I think changing that mindset, and even to get them to think about doing training. That's a more difficult one to change. I think if we can, there are subsidised programmes at the moment. We thought the tax relief might be a good one because, as we said, businesses would be familiar with the R&D tax credit, so maybe something similar might appeal to them. The other one that we also recommend is around the mentors, because I think with the barriers in terms of time and cost, what we found is that when we spoke to the SME managers, a lot of them were using mentors, and again, it was people they knew from their networks or someone they'd worked with in the past, someone from a banking relationship. So they were accessing mentors in quite an informal way, but they found them really useful. So we thought, there's always going to be SMEs out there who they won't have the time to send someone on a course, they won't have the funds, but maybe a register of mentors that they could look to beyond their own existing network might be a useful alternative. So it's really thinking about ways to get people engaged, not necessarily with training, but maybe just upskilling and taking advice from others as a way around trying to get them to upskill.
Yeah, no, that's really useful, because I think, and you've touched on it obviously well, is the fact that businesses who are just starting up, or businesses who are huge, are doing quite well at the minute, and it's that in between. But just the final point for myself, and appreciate you've kind of touched on a lot of the metrics and how we measure this, but in terms of the productivity, that's the key point here, and how we get better leadership management qualifications on. At the minute, is there any way that you think we can be measuring, is there a higher attrition rate of people leaving businesses? Are there higher instances of HR issues, lack of HR practice within smaller businesses? I suppose the productivity, while it's the one that's the largest element of this, obviously there are other factors which feed in. And is there anything that as committee or from the department we can be doing to actually measure those factors which also feed into that broader question?
Yeah, I think from the report, it's not just the training itself that's important. It's what happens after that. So it's the practices you implement or the changes that are made in the business afterwards that will lead to to the productivity improvements. So in terms of the practices themselves, I mean, we did find really good examples of businesses, implementing practices and implementing new practices even after doing training. I just think it's very diverse across the business population. It's not consistent, and therefore it's very hard to gauge, what's optimal and what isn't. Unless you spoke to every business and got a sense of what they're all doing. I think a lot of them are doing what works for them, but and maybe quite often it's sort of a firefighting approach. An issue comes up and they deal with it and maybe putting something in place until another issue comes up. So there's maybe a lack of more long-term strategic sort of practices. In terms of what can be done, again, I think it's just highlighting the importance and maybe having really good examples of, similar small micro businesses who've maybe been able to implement, maybe something very small, but it's led to quite a big change or quite a big improvement. So it's just, I suppose, exposure of those good examples to the wider business population, just to show what changes can bring.
Thank you, that's really useful. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Patrick. Vice Chairman Gary.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Karen, for your presentation. Very useful, informative. I suppose just on the portal point, certainly it's one that I think would be welcome. A good example, I think, of that is the EA and the school leadership or the school development portal. Having been through that with the Board of Governors, there's a sort of a one-stop shop. Everything from and all the different specialties within the governors. So I think it would be welcome, for businesses. My question, I suppose, around how the sort of management styles have changed, which obviously will mean in terms of how training is provided, the increase in hybrid working, what that means for managers, what it means for employees as well in terms of that support and accountability. Have you any thoughts in terms of what that means for management, for leadership and for training in terms of the hybrid change?
Yes, so we did when we were doing the research, we did ask them about did they have management training for remote working or hybrid working, and there was a real mix of answers. So quite a lot, obviously during COVID, most of them had people working remotely. Very few of the businesses access to any formal training in terms of how you manage that well. A lot of them, I think it was just very ad hoc. They were learnt as they went along. This pretty much happened overnight, and so they just had to kind of get on with it and see what worked. I think the issues that arose from that they had identified was it's particularly difficult to manage people remotely when they're new starts or when they're young and they won't have had experience in working in business. So trying to manage people remotely is just a bit more difficult. It's easier to train up employees when they're kind of sitting beside you in the office. But as I said, very few of them had actually sought formal training to deal with that. I think a lot of them just, where there were businesses where their employees had been there a long time, they were able to trust their employees to do the work at home or remotely. I suppose it has brought new challenges, but I don't know that a lot of businesses feel the need to learn how to get formal training to learn how to deal with that. So whether they are effectively managing it, then I guess is the question. I suppose your own business, your own employees, so you maybe know what works best. Whether that's at the optimal level of how they're being managed, I'm not sure, because so few took up training on that. Yeah,
and I suppose linking in with the portal piece as well, a lot of the resources is of course online, which means that if I'm doing my training, I can do it in my own time, and that's a real benefit. I suppose the downside of it, and I think that where the sort of face-to-face is beneficial, is sort of the questions, getting that sort of interaction. As I say, if I do training, I follow all the steps, but if I have particular questions, so I suppose again in terms of the face-to-face, there's an additional cost, but surely that cost would be worth it if it means that you're actually getting better results at the end.
Yes.
Fair.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the businesses, the managers themselves did recognise that. There was a lot of support for face-to-face training because, yes, the asking questions, the peer learning of others who maybe had the same challenges previously or were more advanced and were able to give advice. So it wasn't just the learning from the training provider, it was learning from the peers. There was a recognition that that is more costly, and so while a lot of the managers would have liked to avail of that type of training, many of them felt it was too expensive. I think with some of the larger, medium-sized SMEs, they're perhaps more able to view it as a longer-term investment. So although there is a cost, if they can bear that, they can see the investment. Whereas for the smaller ones who are maybe more budget constrained, the cost is the barrier. So they may well think it would be an investment, but I just can't afford the upfront cost of it.
And just a final question, Chair. I think you'd said, Karen, in terms of the resources are already there. Is that fair to say? So a lot of the resources are there. It's just about pulling it together and putting it in one place?
Oh yes, absolutely. There's a lot of information, and even when we pulled together all this, and at the back of the report we have a list of a lot of the training providers. When we sent the report out to all the companies that we spoke to, some of them came back, and even the ones that were doing training said they weren't even aware of a lot of actually all the what's out there. So there is information out there, but it's spread across. The FE colleges provide training, the universities invest in different private providers and so on. So there's a wealth of information, but if you don't know where it is, then you'll never find it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Gary. Diana?
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Sam. Karen, it's lovely to see you again, and thank you for your report. Yes, I'm looking, in the appendix at all the training providers. There's plenty there, but I guess what it is the small and medium-sized business owners, with the pressures they have and having evolved with their business, is they need to see value for their time. And, I think I'm aware of Tourism NI do courses that work alongside tourism operators, and there's that dependency on that mentor to be there with you through a journey in the learning journey. So I think that is really important. So it's how do you navigate your way through all the training providers and find what is right for you, and that's a major piece of work. But we're talking in the here and now about business now, SMEs, and getting them to that leadership and management level that the productivity is raised. But I'm also wondering, is it something that we need to embed more in the curriculum into primary and secondary education, that there is leadership and management threaded throughout education, that you have a generation coming through, the next leaders, the next management. It's already embedded in behavioural attitudes in school, in the school settings, that when they go to their tertiary education, or if they are entrepreneurs who just want to go straight into business, that has been embedded in them. Is that something that you've looked at, or that you think is worth bringing in to the Department of Education in terms of how that can be addressed in the overall holistic approach to increasing productivity?
Yes, it wasn't something we looked at for this report, but when we've done other studies around entrepreneurship, embedding entrepreneurial education into the school system from an early age, we think is really important. It's not necessarily the case that everyone will grow up and start a business, but if you have those skills, the entrepreneurial skills, the management and leadership skills, then whether you become an employee or start a business, you'll have that baseline of skills already there. And I think the important bit is that it's embedded in your mindset that these are important, because if you go through the education system never experiencing that, and then you become an employee, and as we say, you can get promoted on the basis of being a good employee into a line management role or a senior management role, but never having had any sort of management training, and therefore you don't know what good practice is, you don't know what good behaviour as a manager is, and you're maybe just relying on what you see around you, which also may not be optimal. So yeah, I think embedding those sorts of skills into the education system are really important.
Thank you, Diana. Jonathan.
Thanks, Chair. Very interesting questions, and thank you very much, Karen, for your presentation. I suppose interesting, the relationship between formal and informal management and leadership, because we are all aware that there is quite a considerable uptake in some form of training embedded into these companies, and particularly family-run businesses who probably get the best management and leadership training of all, which is direct experience with parents that have come through the serious experience of creating a business, sustaining a business, and growing it into something that's probably far out-comprehends what they could learn in a classroom. The relationship, comparing that in terms of the similar style businesses, family, small, medium enterprises in the other jurisdictions, what was the comparison like when we compare like for like, as opposed to taking out the multinationals as such, which will have much more corporate management and leadership training embedded in? What was the experience?
I think in terms, so this wasn't part of our own study, but in terms of the other research, I know that actually, for example, the work that was done by the researchers at Queen's for the Productivity Institute, they found that actually it's second generation family owned businesses actually have less good practices. Now they felt that was maybe because it's in-house sort of experiential type learning. So I guess, there's many great examples of Northern Ireland of really well-run family businesses, but there's maybe also examples of less well-run, and if training isn't part of that, if formal training isn't part of that sort of activity that the family business does, so then when the next generation takes over, it's not something on their radar because they didn't see their predecessor do it. So I think there's probably a mixture of family-owned businesses, some very well run, some maybe not so well. Certainly I know one of the ones that we spoke to who hadn't done any management and leadership training, it was someone within a family business, and they literally said they had just never considered it. The business is doing quite well. Their father, who was the previous owner, had never done any formal training, so they literally just never considered it. So I guess there's probably a real mix. Yes, if the on-the-job experiential learning is good and the family business is successful, that works well. But when it's not, and that it's never across your radar to do training, I think that's maybe where there's a gap.
Yeah. There's certainly no shortage of leadership and mentor advice, particularly with the rise of social media. I think anybody that's on it will see every Tom, Dick and Harry's given some form of advice on leadership style. But I read a recent article which alluded to the fact that because of the massive upsurge in appetite for this type of conversation, that a lot of employers have become apathetic towards leadership and mentoring type approval courses, because they believe that there's been a huge cash-in from universities and private providers with really no evidence to suggest that their courses make a material difference for the employees. Is this something that you have observed in your work?
We did come across scepticism about some of the courses. There was, especially amongst those who are quite budget constrained, they really felt that if they were going to spend money on a course, they really needed to know that it worked. And yes, there was a worry that a lot of training courses were generic. It was sort of one size fits all. It wouldn't really give them any additional knowledge that they didn't have already. So there was that concern. I think, again, just going back to the word of mouth was really important. You know, most of them said if they were going to go on a course, it would be one that someone that they knew or within their network had recommended, where there was a demonstrable sort of change or output that led from it. So yes, I do take the point that there is scepticism around, you know, well, if I go on this course, what benefit will it give to me? And I know amongst the businesses themselves, we did ask amongst those who did training, do you track, you know, the outcome of it and track that through to the impact on your bottom line or your profitability or whatever. A lot of them don't. You know, there are examples where yes, once someone does the training, they may have to implement a new practice or implement a change in the business, but there's not necessarily the tracking through in terms of the impact on performance. And I think as one put it, you wouldn't spend more time tracking than actually just doing.
Yeah.
So yes, I do appreciate there is a worry that there's some training out there for training's sake, and people don't want to spend money on what might just be a box ticking. So I think it's up to the training providers again to really demonstrate how this training will help you. What will be the exact impact. Speak in language that businesses will recognise, and have testimonials from those who've been through it that can show.
So following on from that then, the specific recommendation on the portal, I take it there would be a specific bar of entry to be included in that portal in terms of your course credentials and also the mentor credentials?
Yes, in terms of the mentor credentials, definitely. The course credentials, yes. It's not, I guess, we hadn't sort of thought about the practicalities. I guess there would have to be, yes, some level of, I don't know how you would do it, because quite often when we spoke to the businesses, we asked, was accreditation important or certification? And a lot of them said no, that actually it's the practical learning that you get from the course or the training that's important. Whether there's a certificate at the end of it is, for a lot of them, was neither here nor there. Now for others it was important to get the accreditation, so there's that standardisation. So I guess how, if you had a portal, what would the bar be? I think that's one that would probably need a bit of thought to ensure that they're valid.
It's certainly something that comes to my mind, because the last thing I want is to see businesses that believe genuinely they're going towards a portal for people that are going to offer advancement for their workforce, only to be shortchanged at the end of the day. So that's something I would want to keep an eye on. And finally, for me then, is obviously the financial measures that the Chair and I think Roderick touched on in terms of support through whether it's tax relief, etc. How did that compare across the UK and the Republic of Ireland vis-a-vis Northern Ireland?
Yeah, so I think a lot of regions do offer quite similar incentives, either subsidised courses. In Ireland, they have the SkillNet, which is a sort of a larger portal to try and skill up not just managers but employees as well. And again, they have grants and other measures. In other countries, they also used a mixture of tax allowances, they give credits to employees that they can spend on courses, they give grants to businesses to cover a proportion of the training spend. So there's lots of different ways that different governments are trying to support wider training as well as management and leadership. I don't know that there's any consensus that any one specific way works best. I guess it depends on the mix of your business population. I think in Northern Ireland, where we have a lot of micro firms, the cost is probably a particular barrier. And the timing issue, which is really difficult to address through policy. You can't give people more time. And where there's a preference for face-to-face, you can't just recommend go online. So I think we hold up quite well in terms of the offering.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And finally, David.
Yeah, thank you, Karen, for the presentation. Who would deliver the portal? If we're talking about the portal, if we're talking about delivery, who would actually do it?
Yes, that is one that we had thought of, because I know when we did the research, we did ask the SMEs where they were, for example, the NI Business Info website, which I think is on or sits on Invest NI's, although it has a range of information on that. A lot of them weren't aware of that. But in terms of who would own a portal, perhaps the department is best placed to, because with the portal it would have to be kept updated regularly, so there would have to be a resource dedicated to it. So whether that's best sitting under the department, and then they also, as well as just having the portal, you need to be able to advertise it so people know it exists. Yeah. So I think wherever it sits, there would need to be resource to keep it up to date and to advertise it and promote it to business owners.
Okay. Has this been pitched to the department to deliver, or has?
Yes, well, we did present to the department and did have a discussion with them. I think the idea of the portal is something that they were considering not just for management and leadership training, but also, for example, we did other research on innovation support, and there's many of the same issues. There's a lot of innovation support, but businesses don't know it exists or don't know where to find out about it. So they were also thinking about a portal for innovation training, and then does it get to a case that you have half a dozen different portals for different specific things? So I think that's something that they were maybe themselves trying to work through as to what works best, because I think the issue is if you have a portal that covers everything, then it just becomes the same issue. It's too much. But then if you have 6 or 7 individual portals, does that also start to become quite difficult to navigate? So I think they are themselves trying to work through that.
Then, if we, maybe that's something we can pick up as a committee with the department. But when we look at the courses, who you have down, or who the list there is mostly private companies has been discussed, and then the circs, or regional colleges, universities. Are the courses you're saying, there'll be a cynic, I come from that small business, there'll be a cynic in me to go, you're asking me to go to a course that somebody's never run a business before about business. How do you change that culture, and how do the courses adapt to actually deliver for businesses rather than for students or doing degrees or doing training courses? It's that.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, as I said, there was some cynicism about the courses and about what outcomes it would lead to. And yes, I guess, if you're a manager of a business and you're looking at someone you've never met saying, well, how do you know you'll improve my productivity of my business? So we did pick up on the point around language in particular, speaking the language of SME owners. I mean, for example, the term productivity is not something that resonates very well with a lot of businesses, especially as economists. When we talk about productivity, it's a very specific measure. For businesses, productivity can mean half a dozen different things depending on what the business. So in terms of how you address that cynicism, I think it goes back to the testimonials from, I suppose it's getting people onto the courses and then the testimonials from those that have been through it to say this worked or even this didn't work.
Do we need new courses? Do we need additional courses or a change in courses, or is the courses that are there the right sort of curriculum, if you like, or for what the business needs?
We didn't get any sense that there's an issue with what currently exists. It's just businesses that more have barriers and access in it.
Okay.
I guess with the ever-changing world and different issues, management training would have to constantly be evolving and adapting, even with things like AI, net zero, and so on. So I think, yes, there's an onus on the training providers to be up to date, but how do you get that match right between what businesses need and what you're able to provide? I think the training providers need to be in conversation with business owners as to what they need, what, if they were to come up with a course, what is it that businesses are facing challenges with? But again, yes, changing the behaviour and getting rid of the cynicism. I think, honestly, the term word of mouth, I think, came up so often in the consultations that business owners are really trusting of other peer business owners. So if they hear from them that a training course worked and they're thinking of doing it, they're more likely to go on the basis of what a peer says rather than a training provider saying, I can do X, Y, and Z. So
I just found that the absolute cynic in me is somebody coming from business. If business management, business leadership is so bad, does this replicate across onto the civil service and the public sector? Or is there any work been done on that? Or is there anything to be done there? Because the experience I have now is very different than what I had before.
David.
I've just been honest.
Please elaborate.
We did look at public sector in our own research. I think what we found is that the bigger the firm, the more structured training they can provide. They have the budget and so on. So I imagine in public sector organisations which are big and bureaucratic and probably able to offer training to their managers and line managers and so on, probably similar to what we have access to in the university, but whether people engage with that, I'm not sure. I guess there's probably the same issues if people are busy. Even if training's available, you probably think, well, if I do that, it's taken however many hours away from my actual job. So I can imagine the arguments are the same. But
it's a cultural thing, I suppose we're saying, it's engagement and not our lack of engagement.
It's probably lack of engagement. I know in Northern Ireland we don't necessarily have that culture of lifelong learning, so I'm sure that goes through both public and private sector, but I don't have any specific.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that. Karen, thank you so much, as always, for your really useful insights, and please pass on our best to Gareth, and we look forward to welcoming both of you back very soon. Thank you so much.
So, Chair, is the committee content to write to the department, and just, since they know about this report, and just ask for their feedback, how are they taking it forward, particularly the training and information portal recommendations and mentoring too? Members are content with that approach?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, move to item 7 then, members. Causeway Chamber of Commerce, regional balance issues, and we'll welcome forward our guests and colleagues. The committee will now receive evidence from the Causeway Chamber of Commerce on regional economic growth and refer members to a number of pages within their packs. Page 183 is a paper from the Chamber. 817 is the heads of terms for the Causeway Coast and Glens growth deal. Previous departmental papers on sub-regional economic growth. Previous paper from Conor Patterson and a previous Assembly research paper. Colleagues, can I thank you and welcome you here. I have Liam Maguire, Jonathan Hanna, Karen Yates and Steve Fraser, and thank you for giving up your time to come along to committee here this morning. We greatly appreciate it, and I'll hand over to you if you wish to make some opening remarks at this stage.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for hosting in Coleraine. We really appreciate you travelling to see us and spend some time with us today. It is the first time we've done this, so apologies if there's some things that we're not really sure about in terms of documents. I've brought some paper documents with me. By way of introduction, you've just gone through the people that are with me today. Steve Fraser, MD of City of Derry Airport, is also the Vice President of the Chamber. Professor Liam Maguire, PVC of Research and Ulster University, and Jonathan Hanna, who is the Ecotech Business Line Director and General Manager of Terex. We also have in the public gallery Professor Victor Galt, who is the Associate Dean of Research and Innovation and currently Professor of Experimental Medicine and Head of the School of Biomedical Science. He's the longest title. And then we have Annette Beacon, who is the Operations Manager of the Chamber of Commerce as well. So the plan today, if it works for you guys, is that I will give a bit of an overview really of key priorities document, which I believe you have a soft copy of. I have hard copies here as well. I wasn't sure again how that works. If you'd like me to give those out, yeah, okay. We'll just do. Thank you very much. Thank you. I then want to just take you through a brief sort of summary presentation. Again, it's a PowerPoint I think you've had emailed. I then hand over to Steve, who's going to talk to you about connectivity and tourism. Liam is then going to cover the Causeway Coast and Glens growth deal, specifically the food discovery element. And then John is going to give you an insight into the challenges and growth plans of doing business in NI. And one of the specific reasons that actually we asked in Jonathan and Terex to join us is that there's often a commentary around the fact that we've not had any FDI in this area for a very, very long time. When in actual fact, you could argue that a global, American-owned global business that moves into and grows a business in Baloney is FDI. And I think that, one of the things as a chamber that we're trying to work really hard with the other stakeholders is to raise the ambition and the conversation around us as a region. As a chamber, we cover the full Causeway Coast and Glens region. So we cover from literally sort of, Cushendall over to Dungiven. I think actually the airport is probably the furthest. It's just sort of on the border. So yeah, we also, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we also joined a memorandum of understanding with the Derry London Dairy Chamber just 2 years now. Just under 2 years ago, about 18 months ago, and that was specifically with the idea of, of the regional growth piece.
Yep.
We have a lot of sort of conversations anyway, but we wanted to formalise that. And under that memorandum, we decided initially to take sort of 4 key areas of focus, and they were the around the Ulster University sort of growth. They were around tourism, specifically at that point, the Open, which is about to obviously happen, FDI and economic growth generally, and then the piece around connectivity and the need for road, rail and air connectivity in the area. So in terms of this document, I'm not going to go through the whole thing because obviously you've got that with you. We specifically, it's the second time that we've produced a document like this, and we specifically kept it to infrastructure, skills and growth, because even though, sustainability, inclusivity, lots of other areas are important, businesses are doing those anyway. And in terms of what we need your help to deliver on, it is the infrastructure and the skills piece, so that we can then help to deliver the growth. And as a business community, we do believe that we need the right conditions to, in order to do that. And actually, when I was looking through this, ahead of today, we have a few things that have happened. We do now have a 5-star hotel, which is a direct legacy of the Open and of the vision of bringing a global event like that. We still have our sort of challenges around the energy piece here particularly. That's something that that needs to be addressed. Skills, you've just had a long conversation I think about that, so we've obviously got some thoughts and opinions on that. And then in terms of the growth piece, we have some asks which I'll just talk through now in terms of the document, in terms of presentation. So we gave this presentation to the minister, actually, your previous minister, and at the time the finance minister, your current minister, last year, and we looked at updating it, but actually it's still the same, it's still relevant, and we, part of what we want to do is enhance the economic and sustainable growth of this area. In terms of the my hotspot has stopped. Give me 1 second. Tech.
It's great when it works.
And 1 second. But it was still going. Yeah. So in terms of the strategic priorities, before the local economic partnership, we already as an area had an economic advisory group. And so we had been working through that, again with the department as well. And the issue of regional balance, we really want to be part of that. We think that, as a scalable region, even if you, over in Derry, London Derry, they're already working with Letterkenny as well. And I mean, we've had conversations with them about going as far as Omagh, and actually then looking at, a population of circa, 500,000 people in the region. And that starts to become much more powerful then in terms of the opportunities around it, which we believe then will deliver economic growth. And we have some, even though we've got 90+% small businesses, we also have some really large, amazing businesses in our borough now. The Seating Matters, the Defence Houses, Rathbane Group being over there, Terex obviously with us. Aiken Medical just up the road. I'm going to miss a lot as Kerry. There's so many now, but they just get on with it, sort of quietly. And maybe part of our role now is to actually vocalise a little bit more of what's going on. We also believe that we have an opportunity to become what we're calling like the first sustainable borough. An awful lot of the renewable energy that Northern Ireland produces is produced in the borough. The Girona project, which was a funded project that put batteries and solar into houses, was a success. 40% reduction in electricity bills is my understanding. I'm not sure where that has, what the next step is with that, but we have some, I believe we have some footprints that could be utilised and could be built on. And I suppose this promotion of collaboration, again, I think we've been quietly getting on with it, and hopefully this panel today gives you a sort of a visual of the fact that we are working together, with the stakeholders, with the state, but also with the other education partners, with the local enterprise agencies. There's a lot of partnership working going on here now. The piece around aligning with the key priorities of good jobs, regional balance, productivity and net zero, I believe for us, regional balance and the sustainability and innovation piece are the two areas that we need to be front and centre on. And I think that having Liam to be able to talk about the food and drug discovery piece, we need to start marking ourselves out as a region and actually saying we're really good at this. This is what we are here for. So sustainability, innovation around the university and our businesses, I think, is fairly critical. Tourism is incredibly important. I think you could argue that we, in places, we're already leading in tourism, but it's not just tourism. I think actually the fact that the world is changing. You were talking about hybrid living, hybrid working. The Grow the Glens project down in Cushendall. I mean, they have people from Google that aren't bothering to travel to Dublin anymore. That ability to keep life and work in regional hubs and regional towns and villages, I think, is again something that we are doing well. So finally, then, just in terms of the ask, we had the open and the supply chain piece on here, and I'm pleased to say from when we did this, we actually did get invited to sit on the through the RNA and Tourism Northern Ireland on the bronze business engagement group. From that, a supply chain group was developed to make sure that we had some oversight on the fact that the supply chain was to be largely based from Northern Ireland. I haven't got specific numbers that I can release at this point, but it's looking really good. And I think that once the RNA and TNI start to publicise what's been happening, I think certainly I think personally that we should be pleased with the fact that Northern Ireland will do very well for the event, never mind the legacy piece after it. Scalable region I've mentioned. Again, I think that we should, we need to be part of that, and that's part of our ask. We work closely with the university. Malky is on our Chamber Council. The plans for the Coleraine campus, we're very keen to support what's going on there. Maybe controversially, but we'd love to see 16,000 students across the region. So
how many? 16?
16 would be perfect. Net zero I've talked about, and then the connectivity piece I will leave to Steve to talk about a little bit more. So we want to create a vibrant, sustainable economy built on innovation and entrepreneurial spirit. We want to connect all those people who live, work and visit, invest in the Causeway Coast and Glens. We want to contribute to the health and well-being of our citizens, and we want to celebrate all that's great about where we live and communicate this to the world. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Steve?
Thank you. I think firstly it's really important to say that it's a strong message from yourselves that it's the second time I've met you in the Northwest. And that's an important point as well. You're in the Northwest now, whereas maybe some people define where they are in the Northwest differently. But we're firmly at the heart of it as well. As Karen said, our key priorities centre around infrastructure, skills and growth. And connectivity, obviously, with my day job hat on, really important. And it's been a great success for the Northwest, I think, in the last few weeks that the future of the airport is secured and what that can mean both for tourism and for industry, and particularly attracting FDIs. Some of what I say will be reiterating the key messages of what Karen said. We certainly have a great skills pipeline with Ulster University represented here today. We're sitting in Northern Regional College, and we have the Northwest Regional College across the region. As Karen said, it's a sizable region full of desire to grow and diversify, actually beyond how people traditionally see the Causeway Coast and Glens. It's a nice place to go to the beach for a lot of people, and we need to show that it's a lot more than that. Some fantastic examples of success. Terex here with us today. We want to shout about that and show that there's a greater consideration and attract some more from the digital industries, manufacturing, film and TV, the sustainable energy sectors, and maximise the opportunities within that food and drug discovery from the growth deal. Industries, however, in the Causeway Coast and Glens, really it centres around retail, tourism and agri. Karen said over 90% of our businesses are micro, with 9 people or less. And that's come because we are blessed with the natural beauty here, and that's resulted in those core industries. However, the downside can be that the GDP per head is quite low, and resulting in many of our young people wanting to move on after they're educated for those higher paid roles. And those that remain in then are facing the challenges of lower pay and the challenges of childcare, which we're all aware of. I think I would really want to use this opportunity as a sort of polite reminder of what the wider Northwest region is, and it's open for business. We should be included, of course, in the Causeway Coast and Glens when we're selling that whole region, and the possible alternatives to where to invest and even attract incentivised opportunities. If you're talking about Invest NI, for example, and how they could direct people or steer people and make sure that they show off this region as well, maybe helping to address some of that. Let me use the word imbalance while we're talking about regional balance. The MOU, obviously, we've started with the London Dairy Chamber is really important. I think we're trying to spread that out into government committees, councils in particular, maybe how they could collaborate better. The Causeway Coast and Glens is a broad region, as was said. Stretches from Greysteele through Ballykelly, Limavady out to Dungibbon, right across the northwest coast, across to Cushendall. All worth reiterating, particularly since I do listen into your meetings from time to time. And a few months ago, when you were talking about us coming along, someone referred to, we must contact the Coleraine Chamber. That's something we're working hard to create a better understanding of the whole Causeway Coast and Glens region, and that's really important to us. And really, really positive to have a programme for government that's focusing on regional balance. Hugely welcome. And obviously representing the many stakeholders in Causeway Coast and Glens here, we want to ensure that the committee notes the whole geography of the Northwest. We'll probably stress that enough, but it really is important to us what the Causeway Coast and Glens region covers and the full scope of that region. Excuse me. The successes on the horizon in Derry are to be applauded, and I hope there's going to be many, many more of them in Derry as well, and it's just the beginning, and that we're selling the entire Northwest with those opportunities that are represented. And many parts of the Causeway Coast and Glens are always firmly in the reckoning as well. And as I said, and that comes from government committees to our tourism bodies to Invest NI, and right through our growth plans and any policy development that we look at. It's not to be forgotten. Many are already aware that our tourism offering is second to none. And the return of the Open Championship, certainly not by accident. It's because we do it well. And the opportunity isn't just, about those 7 or 10 days where we're in the spotlight. And of course, we have to do a fantastic job, and we will do during that time. But as Karen mentioned, it's about the legacy, and then growing those itineraries for those return visitors right across Northern Ireland. A real chance to showcase the region, and a region that I'm sure many people would like to live, work, and not just play. So to achieve that better balanced economy within the Causeway Coast and Glens, we really must look to add to that offer and strengthen that Northwest opportunity by encouraging that investment right across the region and attracting those new industries and bringing the opportunities that will further enhance what really is one of the best places to live.
That's over to me. Mm-hmm. These are on because I do speak a bit low, so my Fermanagh accent, sadly. I just wanted to probably start off with a thank you in terms of this may have been a different conversation 8 months ago when the Causeway Coast and Glen deal was paused, so it's great that it's back going again. The Centre for Food and Drug Discovery is the core innovation project as part of that, and something that Karen mentioned earlier on. It's something we're really good at here in the Causeway Coast and Glen area. The biomedical research that this is built on is in the top 5 in the UK, and it has consistently been in the top 5 in the UK for 20 odd years. And that's not just us saying it, we get that through the REF exercises, and that's consistently that feedback back. So it's great that we're building on that sort of research expertise, and universities are now generally recognised in the UK as being that centre for innovation and how it can improve the economy. Universities UK have done a report that said about every £1 spent on universities adds about £14 into the local economy. And I have meetings with my equivalents across the UK, and they're quite envious of the innovation aspects that we have at Ulster and we have in Queen's. Northern Ireland is actually really well placed in terms of how it does innovation, how it builds on our research expertise, and how it links into local industry. But back to the Centre for Food and Drug Discovery, it's a £22 million project. £20 million of that is coming from the city and growth deal from Causeway Coast and Glen, £2 million from the university. It's all about trying to supercharge, I suppose, that research that we have in the biomedical sciences and food and drug discovery. It's going to build that collaboration and provide that one-stop shop for industry in these really, really important areas. It's going to try and provide access support for existing companies in the region, hopefully attract new companies, new FDI companies to the region. And something that we've been really successful at is spinning out new companies from our research. We've about 4 or 5 really strong spin-outs from the research on our Coleraine campus from the research that we've been doing in this area. So we're at a very good stage in this. We've just had a meeting earlier on this week looking at the internal approvals, what we're calling an OBC+. Sorry, that's a new term for me as well, in terms of trying to get this over the line. We're hopefully taking that through our internal university approval processes over the next month to then supply to the Causeway Coast and Glens Council to allow that be submitted and go through the casework. I think casework has been provisionally scheduled for some time towards the end of the summer, so we're hoping approvals are in place with a fair wind by the end of this calendar year to allow us to go then start into 26, 27 to make this work.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so I suppose sort of come to talk about how Terex falls under the chamber. So Terex, as you know, is a global manufacturer. Probably it's well known for the brands like Screen and Finlay, which traditionally came from the Gannon and Omagh direction, so County Tyrone was a big hub. Terex is a global manufacturer with a global supply chain worldwide, so we basically export into every country in the world, every continent. And our products, we try to go through a cyclical environment, which we've experienced recently, demand dropping and increasing, but we've developed a large portfolio of products from lifting to quarry to environmental to recycling that sort of try to overcome that recycling environment, and most of which are here. So Terex has been here for 25 years since they initially bought the Power Screen and Finlay establishment. So now they have facilities in Dungannon, Omagh, Cookstown, as well as Campsie and Ballymoney. So Ballymoney, how it came about, you can hear from my accent, I'm local to Ballymoney, but how it came about was they acquired they acquired JMF Fabrications in 2015. JMF had been in the area from the mid-80s, and they were a supplier of Terex. And acquired in 2015 is a bit of a strange acquisition. It was the first time they ever acquired a business that didn't have an end product. So JMF just fabricated painted parts for Dungannon. So it did take a bit of thought whether to go ahead or not. But I think we've already seen they acquired it for $6.5 million. And today it's probably turned over around 45 million. So it's already paid back a multitude of times. And with that acquisition, one of the things we looked at, it brought a whole new supply base, it brought a whole new personnel to the area, while before it was very heavily based in Tyrone. So it opened the doors to a new skill set, and that's something then they pushed on with when they acquired the Campsie site. So the Campsie site was bought off the back of the Ecotech brand, look after, which is environmental products. So while traditionally you know here of the crushing and screen rock, products in Ecotech crush and screen your black bin waste or wood or waste wood or waste metal and waste recycling materials. So that's how that came about. And again, rather than do we purchase a site in mid-Ulster, and the answer was sort of no, we thought we'd go to the northwest and purchase again and try again, explore a new set of people, a new skill set, and also brought about the collaboration here with NRC and also Maguire, University of Ulster, which wasn't really captured. And that sort of overcame the biggest challenge, probably that skill set and infrastructure set allowed for that to come. Recently, probably there's been a big growth, and it's been sort of coinciding. When we joined the chamber, we sort of took our big growth after COVID. 2021, we went from about 220 employees in Ballymoney to over 300. Now we have been through a cyclical change. We're now sitting about 250, and we're recruiting currently to go to 270, and we'll go back to that 300 at the end of the year. And how that's came about is by introduction of new products and product development and new markets and segments. The Ballymoney site would supply all our brands in Northern Ireland, so it's sort of quite cyclical proof that we can insource and develop and weld and paint and assemble products for all the sites. So over that growth, we've put in a considerable amount of investment. So we invested 4 million in our machine shop by automating a lot of processes. Part again of the infrastructure challenges, we took out a lot of old equipment, and we're trying to get a very sustainable business, so we put in a lot of new cotton equipment. And now, hopefully in August, we're going to open our new expansion, which is 70,000 square foot, and that's a £15 million development with a new powder coating line and a new expansion, which will create another 60 jobs for the area. And but those 60 jobs then come about because they'll feed all the other sites, which create more jobs and more sales there. It's one of our constraints is supply of product. So rather than go low cost country for importing, we looked at bringing it more here because we have a very strong core skill set. Our challenges we worked on in brewing skills is pretty much laid out, and the key priorities were a lot of local schools. We do a lot of STEM activities, like you mentioned the last time, trying to get into primary schools. We do a lot of work with P5, P6, P7, a lot of first year work with secondary schools around the area to try and encourage them when they leave school to come. We work with the colleges here, things between weld academies, but also look at automation. So now our challenge is not getting welders, our challenge is getting robotic welders, so people who can program robots, because it's okay putting all this infrastructure in and no one can work it. So this skill set moves, but we're working here with all the local colleges and that. And that's really, Terex is sort of now, with the investment of that multitude, Ballymoney and the Northwest is really an area that we're focusing to stay in. And it's really actually developed the growth of the other sites. Dungannon was able to grow, Oma, and Campsie, those products, Power Screen, Ecotech, EvoQuip, there's a multitude of brands. Export worldwide were able to grow because Ballymoney was able to grow, and that's led to a lot of success. So.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much. There's just one other thing I think that's worth sort of commenting on before we open up the floor, and that is the fact that we recently had, along with I think 27 other organisations, a meeting with the Secretary of State, which you're probably aware of, and I think the conditions for business at the moment, particularly for small businesses, if we're being really honest, are really, really tough. I think from access to finance, the national living wage and the national insurance, which I know aren't necessarily things that you guys can control. But one of the things that we have continually talked about is we want every company wants to pay their staff well, but we're getting to the point now where we're looking at sort of very young people and people without experience starting at a place that not that long ago was probably sort of, let's call it, low management level. Yeah. And the reality is that means less hours, less time, and less people. Automation is the other piece that follows on, and we know we're going to end up with a more automated workplace. We know that AI is going to impact. That's all absolutely, that's what we do. I mean, I run a business as well. I'm only part-time in this role. So we all understand that, but I do think that there's an argument for a regional living wage, and I don't think that anybody is necessarily hearing that. It's very different if you live in the southeast of England. And the costs everywhere are going up, but I think we need to have some sort of flexibility around that. I know I remember hearing a great story from you guys about the cobots
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, you're looking for skills for somebody to run this. It's not a welder. You need somebody who can work an iPad.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, and businesses are really good at being flexible and agile and working around that and then going, actually, that's what we need. But if that person's basically going to cost you £25,000, which is sort of circa where it is now, that's an awful lot whenever, whether it's whatever the output is from your cobot, or whether it's somebody, you know, standing waiting for a customer to come in, or whether it's, you know, the number of burgers you're going to sell. It's all of those things now are just getting to be really difficult. I think it would be remiss of us not to mention those struggles at the moment. I know of this week of in our region 2 companies, both of which, well, one had been around for 50 years, and the other one I think was probably similar, and they've both gone to the wall, and that's not a good place to be. So sorry to end on a bit of a sort of, you know, sober note, having heard all of the amazing work that's going on, but I think it's important.
And there's a big challenge every year, the last few years, with the national minimum wage increase, because it has a sort of whole flex approach to your business, and you have to pass that cost on, or you run into problems, and sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And it's been a big margin percent in terms of its investments and big spends.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for that. It's really, really helpful. I suppose maybe we do start with the positives. In terms of the growth deal, are you able to articulate the importance of that to this region?
Yeah, I mean, I think that to have that level of investment in this area is huge. We obviously also got the Town Future Fund as well, which I think is really important. I think that it's about leveraging then the other funding and the other opportunities, you know, on top of that. We personally, and I think from a chamber perspective, all of the projects are important, but it's not an accident that we have the university. This is where we need to focus. We need, as I said before, we need to focus on what we get known for that isn't, I don't want to say just tourism, but tourism plus. And I think we need to. So yeah, I mean, it's huge opportunity. We are, as an organisation, we're here to support and help in any way that we can with that. Obviously, there's a process. We get slightly frustrated that it takes so long, if we're honest. But then that's just, I think, the way these things are. We've got to look for the 10 and 20 years sort of future. But yeah, it's huge for us. And
in terms of the Town Future Funds, are you involved in the Coleraine?
Yes, we are. Yeah. We actually we have as an organisation we have a seat on the main board, and then we also are one of the deputy chairs of the town centre part of it, so the history and heritage. And I think that again, looking at the area and the potential, it's not going to be very easy, I don't think. I think the town centres are under huge pressures for lots of reasons, including some of the we've just mentioned. But I don't know if you get the chance today, but if you go to the top floor and the balcony of this building and you look over at Coleraine, it gives you an incredibly different perspective of actually, how gorgeous it is. So I think we, again, and there's some businesses that are doing really well still. But yeah, it's going to be a challenge. But I think it's going to be about leveraging other funding as well and being clever about that.
Okay. One of the reasons that I was keen to bring the committee here is I think it's a region that's often overlooked when, I think Steve articulated this, when people talk about the Northwest, and we have some very able representatives from Foyle on this committee, but when they think of the Northwest, some people's view is that only means London and doesn't mean the wider region. We don't have a member from East Londonderry on this committee, but when you look at the sub-regional economic plan produced by the Minister, the challenges that this council area faces are stark and are just as difficult as some of those underperformers. So I was just keen to get your view on the Minister's allocation of funding. I raised concerns about it. You received the same amount of funding on some metrics as Lisburn and Castlereagh, which is the fourth highest, while you were ranked the second lowest. So I was just keen to get your view. Obviously, you said you met with the Minister. Was there any discussion of the Minister as why the funding levels awarded to this council area was not comparable to its neighbours, despite having the same difficulties?
I think it's an issue almost like it's the PR, it's the perception. When you arrive in this area, and especially on a day like this, it looks amazing. We've got, all of these amazing big events that happen. I think we've been overlooked for lots of reasons in the past. And I think also we have to look to ourselves and the organisations in the area, and we've maybe not really shouted loud enough. I think that, again, Steve really pushed to get this, had these conversations and you guys being here. We've never done this before. I think we did it once in COVID. As an organisation, as in personally for the organisation, for the Chamber, we have myself a couple of days a week, and then we have Annette, who's our full-time employee. That's the resource we have at the minute, and we need to grow that resource. And we need to get more companies involved to actually drive that ambition. So I think we've probably been overlooked because we were too quiet in lots of ways. I think we haven't been clear. I think the level of ambition maybe hasn't been as great as, which is why the growth deal is really, really important. So I think maybe we've been quietly getting on with it, but now we need to, we do need to shout louder. And actually, I think interestingly, when you look at things like the economically inactive, we have, our numbers aren't great on that at all. But we have an organisation in Palomoni actually who are doing some incredible work. Another chamber member who we've now mentioned to the minister because they're job coaches. Because economically inactive is no longer, necessarily just about, a disability or being neurodiverse. Now it's affecting all ages. A lot of it is around anxiety, lots of issues. So yeah, I think we've got to look to ourselves first. I think we've got to get get clarity on what we've got to offer, and then we've got to just keep pushing. And we've got a meeting actually with the minister on the 4th, but it's actually with the Derry London Dairy Chamber, because I think the reality as well is that if we've got a strong Derry London Dairy and a strong Belfast, we'll win just as much. We're not a city, but we are a large geographical region.
Sure. And I just think it's, on some occasions it's more than perception, and you probably have, but I would just encourage you to read the department's own document. Causeway, Coast and Glens ranks second lowest in terms of labour productivity, second lowest in terms of median wages, third lowest in terms of sub-regional economic employment rate, but your funding doesn't reflect that, so I would encourage you to raise that with the Minister when you have the opportunity. Finally, in terms of just slightly unrelated issue, but while I have you here, good jobs bill that the Minister is proposing to seek executive approval for. Have your members had any engagement on the issue, raised any issues with you? And I suppose, Jonathan, maybe something that you might touch on if you
Sorry, I missed the question.
The good jobs bill, are you aware of it?
Yeah. It is something we're looking at. Recruitment and skills and labour is our biggest challenge still. Even though we move towards sort of growth, it's still something we're having to think about and where we go. I think a number of topics we've mentioned today that sort of reside with us as far as how do we cater for skill set, how do we cater for new people, how we can support it, and that is something we're always considered to do. At the minute we're going through again a cyclical environment where we dropped off and now we're really starting to grow again. So we're in the height of our recruitment period at the minute, so it's something we're having to really work hard in doing and fix those challenges.
And is your organisation aware of the Minister's proposals in relation to changes to employment law?
No, it's not something yet we've really delved into. So.
And how many people do Terex employ across?
2,000.
So you'd be one of the biggest employers?
Yeah, we're one of the biggest employers
in Northern Ireland.
2,000. At the minute, just under 2,000 between the sites over the country, that's ranging from finance and American to manufacturing, sales, engineering.
And as one of the biggest employers of Northern Ireland, you've had no engagement from the Minister about the biggest proposed changes to employment law?
Personally, I haven't, no. So I don't know now if it's filtered through from other people in the organisation.
If I just come in on that just briefly, in terms of, I saw the Minister's comments yesterday, and actually what I understand, I'm not expert, but that flexibility around the 0 hours potential contract, I think could be quite important to a lot of the smaller companies. I think the bigger companies, a little bit like your presentation before, they have the HR departments. They're doing everything that they need to do. It's the small businesses again, and I don't think that the awareness is huge. I think across the region, I'm aware of it because of doing this part time.
Yeah.
I don't know the detail of it, but I did see the flexibility piece because an awful lot of businesses over the last number of years have been using the flexibility of having somebody on a 0 hours contract who usually wants to be, if we're honest.
That's the point.
Who actually wants to be, because it suits them as well.
We took benefit.
That's exactly the point.
Now they put out 16 hours and then you didn't have the benefits, you're able to keep your benefit. So during the growth period last year, we started 16-hour contracts because people wanted to work a Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
Whether they were in education, we also put on a shift where people could work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then go to education during the week.
Yeah.
And we had worked with a local recruitment agency in Hanna as part of the chamber, and we had some 15, 16 people work that sort of shift. It was very successful. It allowed us to basically work 7 days a week. And again, it's because they wanted it. It was got them into employment.
I think the danger is that the intention of a bill like that to do good for the people that aren't particularly treating their staff well could damage the people that actually are treating their staff well.
That's an important point. I think the language used, if I may be so blunt, was unhelpful. When the intention, I'm sure, is a good one to filter out those who are manipulating the situation, but a lot of us use those contracts very flexibly, and actually to deliver flexibility for those that are working those contracts.
No,
they're actually very, very happy in those contracts. But there will be a minority. Maybe the language used by the Minister in the statement was biased towards that minority of people experiences in the 0 hours contract.
Yeah. And final question for me, Liam, if you don't mind. My colleague Maurice Bradley won't forgive me if I don't take this opportunity. Ulster University remain committed to their Coleraine campus.
Sorry?
Ulster University remain fully committed to their Coleraine campus.
Of course, yes. We're committed to all 3 campuses of the university and very much committed to this campus. I think the City Deal investment is a sure sign in terms of what we want to see that development.
Brilliant, thank you. Padraig?
Thank you, and thanks very much for your presentations. I thought they were really, really strong and being drowned out, I think, by that outside. So I'll try and speak a wee bit louder. But, I think from the outset of your presentation, what you've set out very clearly is a collaborative approach across the Northwest and across this entire region. And that's the strength, really. Obviously, being an MLA for Derry myself, I know the memorandum of understanding you have, I know the great work that you're doing, and I think that's testament here today that you're able to showcase that and actually talk up this region and what's being done. So I think, firstly, it's to thank you and to congratulate you on the positive work that's been done across this area. It's brilliant to see. For me, there were a couple of points. And I really appreciate the point about tourism, because I think that's a point that people naturally, and I naturally, would go to in my head, but there's obviously so many other elements to that. But I do want to contradict myself here a bit by starting on that point, if that's okay, because one of the key things that the Minister has spoken about, and I know there's been engagement with counterparts in the South, has been around linking up the Causeway Coast and the Wide Atlantic Way. So just to kind of get a sense from yourselves, has there been positive engagement with the Southern Government on that? Is there anything that as a committee we can be doing around that? Just to get a sense from yourselves of how that's working in practice.
I'll take that if I can. Yeah, we've had a lot of good engagement with both TI and TNI. It's fair to say that it's going to take time. At the minute, it's in the signs stage with 2,600 signs to be addressed, but it has huge potential. You look at places like Derry, you look at the places in the Causeway Coast and Glens, they're maybe limited with itinerary, and if you want people to come here and stay longer, you need to extend that itinerary, which is that collaborative approach that you talked about. It's really important that we can link up to world-class activities with the Causeway Coast and Glens through the walled city, of course, and then on to the Wide Atlantic Way. So it's extremely important. It's in its infancy, but they are talking to the stakeholders, and I'm sure that will increase. I'm involved, but it's largely at the signs kind of stage at the minute, and of course it will require some investment as well. Tourism Ireland are very strong on it, and we're pleased to be able to stretch that itinerary.
I think as well, from the Chamber perspective, we haven't really engaged previously that much with Tourism Northern Ireland, but through the Open, we've started to do that, and I think that's something that we need to continue to do, because again, the business perspective of tourism is really important, and it's not for, it's not because they didn't ask us, or we didn't have the capacity necessarily, in the past. And it's been really helpful, and the work that we've been doing has been actually around the Open has been incredible. It's been very impressive. So we want to continue that.
Aye. No, that's brilliant, and it's good that there has been positive engagement. I suppose that's really reassuring to hear. Just on that, probably from yourself again, Steve, if that's okay. Just around the Dublin Airlink. Obviously, you've mentioned the importance of the airport for this entire region. There's a vendetta going on against me out the cars on the road, isn't there? So it was obviously there's been a huge positive work, and I think even your presentation has been really useful in framing that, because a lot of people from outside the region see that as an airport that's based in Derry, when actually it's in the East Derry area, and there's connectivity across the region, across the piece. So you're obviously, as you mentioned, Karen, well connected, and I suppose a rising tide lifts all boats, and we all know that saying. But you've mentioned about Derry and Belfast and the positivity for this region, and that. In terms of your link with Dublin, that's really important through the PSO. And where's that at? I know, from myself and Project McLaughlin, we've been putting on loads of PQs down south about this. But in terms of on the ground,
after the funding being secured in the last 10 days, it's the single most important thing on our priority list.
Okay.
And that's both for tourism and FDI in the region. Okay. Tourism, because we know 80% of the visitors plus enter through Dublin. They look at the itinerary and go, do I really want 4 hours in a coach each way? Causeway, Coast and Glens, the Derry area, it's a turn-off. But when you look at your itineraries, when maybe you can go a little bit west for a couple of hours, and that equally is a good a time. Maybe not as nice as scenery. So it's really important to deliver tourists into the northwest. Both TNI and PI are very supportive of that. And of course for FDI across the region, first thing they want to see when they visit a city or a town is where's the grade A office space, and the next thing is how do our people get there. Obviously being able to deliver particularly the US market in via Dublin, that's extremely important. So lots of positive engagement with both Invest in IDA on the Republic of Ireland side, and with the Minister's office in the Republic of Ireland, and direct with the Taoiseach's office. You would have heard his speech in Dublin Castle, referenced the shared island a few weeks ago. He had no need to mention the Derry to Dublin route, but it was in his speech, it was firmly there. It's clearly in the programme for government now, so we've no doubt it will be delivered, and I would hope to see it delivered this year, and then we'll all start to see the benefits across the northwest, both for FDI and tourism growth.
I think as well, we were talking earlier on about word of mouth, and I think that you can't underestimate the value of the brand. Logan Air have done an incredible job, but having EasyJet, now having more routes, it just means that more people talk about it, and certainly in this area, we have an event. It's actually our normal Chamber Council on the 22nd, and it's over in Roe Park, which is now part of Galgorm, another great brand in the area. And that is along with Steve's team and the airport, just to start to talk again about the potential, because we do need to remember that we can, we're very lucky now, we can go either way, to the airport. We can head down the road to Belfast, either airport or Dublin, or we can just go much shorter journey over and link into a great network. So
I think it's important because sometimes we measure the distances by our own standards. I was in Dublin recently and I passed a group of Americans who were asking about getting a taxi to the Cliffs of Moher. So I wouldn't have liked to see the meter at the end of it, but it shows you that idea that for us, we think in our own terms, and I think we need to look at that international market and actually recognise that type of desire to do things like that actually opens up areas like this much more frequently and with much more ability if we do have air links in through the city of Derry as well. So I mean, I can only speak for our own party, but we're certainly more than committed to keeping pushing that and obviously working with you to do anything we can on that. Final point just around the food innovation and Dungiven public realm as well. I think I could be wrong on this, but there's an element of public realm in Dungiven is there as part of the city deal? And then maybe just from yourself, Liam, as well, just in terms of the food innovation piece, the other innovation pieces, if there's anything, just again as committee, I think it's really useful to get out and to do these visits. But it's the most important piece is what we take back and what we can do going out of here. So are there any barriers that you're experiencing that we can either as committee do or anything through the department?
I can probably comment on the Dungiven because that's part of the infrastructure tourism part, but I know there is a public realm piece there. But in terms of city and growth deals, in terms of innovation, I think there has been quite a dramatic change in terms of the speed, in terms of how things have been approved and been. Because I've been involved in city deals now for 5-6 years, and it was quite slow for a while, and it's now much better. I think lots of the, I suppose, good practice that we've learned in the Belfast Region City deal is helping some of the other deals and helping speed that up. So I think for us, we are working towards an OBC Plus, where there is a time scale there we'd like to be. So if you can have any help and support in terms of helping that through its casework, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, thanks.
And I haven't got an update in terms of the given part of it. I believe that again everything's progressing. We've got another meeting maybe next week.
Okay.
But just in terms of in terms of food piece around innovation, I suppose the only thing that's top of mind is that we had a collaborative network. We have a collaborative network that created Taste Causeway, similar to the legendary foods. It's currently sort of self-funding, and certainly as a chamber, we would be critical of that as a brand. With all of the awards, it's achieved, and just generally that being able to raise the expectations and the experiences, I think that would be something that would be, how they go forward is, I think, something that needs to be on everybody's horizon, because it would be, I think it would be detrimental for that brand to spare. Not suggesting it is right now, but I know that funding is
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. It's been really, really interesting and huge information for us to take away. So thanks.
Can I come back for another ask? Sorry, it's a bit great of me, but you mentioned about the city is a very capital funding base, so I'm not so sure if there are conversations about City Deals 2.0 in terms of what happens next, but beware, I think it probably needs to pivot more towards recurrent rather than capital funding, because lots of stuff we do are very capital intensive, but to make these things work we need people in recurrent budgets. Yeah. So if there was to be a second stage piece across all City Deals, I think recurrent funding would be a huge help.
Gary?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to each of you for your presentation. Very informative. Obviously, it is important when we talk about regional imbalance in the northwest that Causeway Coast is very much part of that as well. I suppose a question from me is in terms of the local economic partnerships, and the Chair had touched on some of the indicators, and I think it is sort of poor reading, to be honest, for Causeway Coast and Glens. So I think we need to make sure that whatever investment is provided, that it's focused on those areas with the greater need. The local economic partnership, one of the strengths, I suppose, about the constituency that I represent in Foyle, there have been many false dawns over many years. So to get to the point where they are now has been a very long, and as you've said, Karen, it's actually been a very slow process. But there's a great network and a unity of purpose now right across the board, and I think that needs to be sort of replicated in terms of that public voice, which doesn't solely rely on the chamber, because in our neck of the woods it's not just the chamber. There's the university, there's all the other partners. How do you see the local economic partnerships having an impact in terms of some of those indicators? Productivity, the employment rate. Do you see it as a game changer or just another, I suppose, step in the right direction? And a further question to that is the Invest NI piece. Invest NI are obviously restructuring and moving sort of personnel and sort of taking steps to try and address regional imbalance. Is there going to be a positive development for yourselves in that? And have you had much engagement with Invest NI? Sorry, it was a lot of questions.
No, not at all. But I think the fact that we've had an economic advisory group as an output of the community plan for quite a number of years means that it's good and bad. Actually, it means that we've had the right stakeholders in the room for a long time, but it was advisory. So the difference for us with the local economic partnership is the potential that there is some funding to actually, get some stuff done, if you like, and also again to leverage other funding. So, is it a game changer? I hope so. I think we need the clarity again, and we've been working for quite a long time with actually Des Gartland from Invest and I, who sits on the short, medium, and long-term goals, and they're not, they're not that different to the community plan and strategy. So I hope so. It's early days. I think that part of our role is just to keep the focus, get the clarity, and really not just end up going, well, we need a hub, or we need the hub needs to be about food and drug discovery. It needs to be about enabling some of the outputs from university. Some of the things that we mentioned, that opportunity to be a sustainable, first sustainable product, that's something that was put into the plans through the LEP because of that. So yeah, I hope so. I think the second part of the question was Invest NI.
It was just in relation to Invest NI, their sub-regional offices, and what it would mean for jobs here.
Yeah, I mean, we have good relationships. Invest NI have been supportive, but we need more, and we need to shout for more. And I think, again, we maybe haven't, there was talk of another office. Does that need to be here or not? It's not about that, it's about people. And I think, seeing what's going on at the moment, it'll be really interesting to see where it all lands. I think your previous speaker was talking about, and somebody else mentioned, business people like to speak to people who've been in business. And I think the quality, we said this in Derry at the meeting first, I can't remember if it was a strategy or it was a launch of a strategy or a consultation around the Invest NI strategy, and we specifically said the quality of the people in the organisation are critical, because it's a complicated world, and being in business now is even more complicated and complex than it ever was, I think. So, we need people that can not just point us in the direction of a programme or some training, but can actually, challenge and be that critical friend. So yeah, we need a little bit more, I think.
Can I just comment on the local economic partnerships? I think the potential to be positive. I think the way they've started sits a little bit awkwardly with me. They were divvied up by council area. That draws borders in itself. But I can assure you, in terms of the Northwest perspective and the collaboration that you talked about, two of us here sitting at this table sit on the Derry and Strabane local economic partnership, and one of us at the Causeway Coast and Glens. That already shows the overlap that we have as a group and the synergies. So there is some strength in looking for those opportunities to make even more of it by collaboration. But I think starting by divvying up by council area, it was an awkward start, but nonetheless a positive investment across the country. But I think Invest NI should be the gatekeeper, if you like, for making sure we're not all doing our own thing and some of us are overlapping, and we could be much stronger by collaborating.
I think as well, with back to the economic partnership idea as well, at the very beginning was that sort of idea, well, if this area wants to do this in tourism and this area wants to, well, we can just deliver the same. We need to be just more joined up across the piece.
No, thanks for that. And just a final question.
No,
it's just because
we would deal a lot with Invest NI currently on sustainability. So we're involved with them in a number of collaborative projects about using nitrogen and using other fuels and sustainability in our products. But also, one of the things we're trying to work with Invest NI, we have a sort of vision through the Ecotech brand and the Causeway and Ballymoney Northwest, creating that as a hub for environmental. So again, going back to Terex bought Power Screen and bought Finlay and Ganaloma, there was so much spin-off from Ulster. So many companies came out of Power Screen and came out of Finlay that set up business, the ages, all these different businesses, and plus the many subcontractors that make parts, make rollers, make weldments, everything else. And we're now at a vision of the environmental, setting up a hub around Magee and University of Ulster, around that campus facility at Ballymoney, where we could then be an environmental hub, a crushing and screening hub in Mid-Ulster. We have a fire which are working now on a lot of technologies in AAE, and we do a lot of sorting waste materials, things like that. So it's a challenge at the minute just getting on board, but that's where a vision that Terex sees that we could sort of bring that whole Mid-Ulster segment of manufacturing to the northwest, and a different sector which is more cyclical proof, it's more sustainable, so environmental.
Well, thanks for that, John, and obviously to commend you and Terex for taking that proactive step as well to look across Northern Ireland to say, we're going to go in there and recognise that, as you say, another talent pool, more skills, and we're seeing the benefits of that. So really, that's really useful. The final point for me, and I know tourism, you're known for that, and I suppose there's a downside to that because that's all we focus on. But I just think that certainly that's one of the things that sort of the city that I represent we haven't been so good at for a few years in terms of the legacy of these types, with the UK City of Culture, and we never really capitalised after that in terms of the legacy of it. And for yourselves, obviously you had opened in 2019, and speaking to some of the local businesses at the time, because obviously I would frequent the area, and they sort of maybe felt a wee bit left out in terms of you have the grand open and all that it brings, and then the sort of event. And this time round, it's very welcome that it's here again. But maybe, Karen, could you maybe outline, you talk about the supply chains and the benefits there, the legacy after the Open, and the importance of those types of events, getting support. We talk about the Northwest 300, with the International Air Show. Every year they seem to scramble for funding. What's the importance of that and the legacy of that?
I mean, I think obviously, we had a bit of a false sort of start because we had COVID straight after the original Open, which, but actually we also then had sort of the 2021, 2020, when nobody was travelling, and the number of people that came to the area that maybe we wouldn't normally have done, sort of went up. So it's been a bit of a having said that, obviously, Dunluce Lodge, which is just open, is one of the key things. We've got the Royal Portrush have bought the building next door, a building on the course. So there, the number of beds I read recently are up hugely in the area, which is good and difficult. Hotel-wise, I think we've got the Marcus opening in Portrush very soon with Andrew's House from Rajesh. So that, in fact, we've got the Shore and Lawn, I think they're called, that have bought the Adelphi and the Atlantic. So McKeever's have now bought the Lodge Hotel. So we've now got sort of, and then you've got Galgorm in the wider piece. So you've got this interest in the area. We've got more beds than we had, but it's the joined up piece. I think that's really sort of important, exactly as Steve was sort of suggesting. And I think one of the things that through being able to hear about the organisation of something like the Open, that has struck me is the fact that if you've got people that want to come here and they want an experience, then what is that experience that we're going to offer, and what levels of experience are they? Because I think we've been very good at the sort of our natural resources, but now we're going to have to add to that, and there are people doing that. And doing it doing it really, really well, but we're going to have to do that more, and we're going to have to get more joined up. So I think there's a challenge there on that. I think that from a business perspective, the RNA have changed the rules this time, and you can come out if you want to. I think if you've paid the money for the golf, that's probably unlikely to happen. But having said that, hopefully businesses have learned that you might not have somebody at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but you might have them at 8 o'clock at night, or and there has been engagement, with, through the organisation, through the local council. So I think we've just got to understand that a global event happens to us, and then it's up to us what we make of that.
Exactly. Okay, good. Emma.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to you all for the presentation and answering so many questions. I have two things I wanted to pick up on, and can say at the outset, it's great to hear Mid-Ulster being mentioned so much as a Mid-Ulster rep. When you talk about Terex, that's what I think about, the lower end of her constituency, but I think that like expansion and growth and looking, and like as you pointed out, the amount of sheds around that whole sort of offshore area with people that maybe started Parish Green years ago and then as a result of that have now got their own business going, and the sort of indigenous nature of that is really promising for this area. But I wanted to sort of pick up on the point that Padraig had been asking around the tourism bit. We had a bit of concern when we had a presentation from the tourism sector earlier in the year around the ETA and the impact that's going to have, particularly because so many of our visitors into the north are coming via the 26 counties. And like Philip referred to the northwest. When I think of the northwest, I automatically think of Donegal, Derry. And to me, you know, if you have an international visitor who wants to go to Slieve League or Dunfanaghy, they probably would be interested in seeing the Giant's Causeway, the Dark Hedges, that like the whole coastline is class, obviously. So I just wanted to get a sense of whether or not that has been mentioned by your tourism providers. I know you have that concern around the number of available beds, but is there a concern now in a reduction of visitors, or what way are businesses handling that?
Yeah, there is. It can be nothing but detrimental. It cannot help. It's not going to add. It's not going to make people come here because they have to pay extra to come here, or they have to understand the regulation. It's absolutely nothing but detrimental to our tourism market. Of course, it's too early to say that we can measure that effect. But you look at somewhere like Derry, Donegal, the natural hinterland, the Causeway as well. You have to try and understand it, and it's not going to be policed. So some of us are looking, well, do you really need to do it? But actually, we've got some real bona fide tour operators, tourism organisations that are kind of, the policing's been foisted onto them. They have to inform the people buying their packages and the tours and add those charges on. But it's nothing but detrimental. It's adding absolutely nothing. It will not attract any extra people. And of course, the measure of that's difficult to say, but how can it help having another form to fill in, having to pay extra money? And then understand those of us who live in border regions, sometimes you don't know what bit you're in. I can't speak anything positively about that at all. And I think time will tell with the effect. You'll always hear the other argument, people are so used to it when they go to the US. It's what we've done for years when we go to the US. But it's something else we just don't need here. And when I talked about the itineraries earlier, we have joined up itineraries, and our strength will be the Wild Atlantic Way linking with the Causeway Coast. We can put a lot of time and effort into that. Will the tourists, 80% of them entering through Dublin, stop at the end of the Wild Atlantic Way and not go over the border because it's too clunky? So nothing positive to say about the ETA whatsoever. It can only harm us.
And you're obviously feeding that frustration or concern or anxiety on. I know the Minister has met with counterparts in the British government around it and is trying to get resolution.
We raised it with the Secretary of State at the same meeting. We talked about the living wage and national insurance, and we raised it. The response actually was partly, it maybe will be like the Esther, and we'll just have to sort of get who's going to police it. But as Steve said, businesses, don't get up in the morning to do things in the wrong way. They get up to do them, as much as they can in the right way. So, it is an issue.
Yeah. I suppose just as one follow-on to that, because again, I represent that Ulster, and it's one of the sectors that we're trying to promote in our area. So we kind of have the heavy engineering, the manufacturing, the construction covered, significant agricultural industry there too. But the tourism is something that we're trying to grow. And I suppose when you look across the north, we have traditionally been obviously behind our counterparts across the border because of the history of the area and the conflict and all of that. And you're seeing this sector who have made amazing strides in spite of all of those challenges, and then when you look at they're at a place now where they are growing and you see these barriers being put, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at more beds. We're looking at trying to promote longer stays and then something like this, obviously could potentially affect that. So yeah, it's not in any way ideal, Steve, right? I think it's
No, there's no one in the north saying that it adds anything or in any positive way. Regardless of who you are, what organisation you are. No. I think NITA are doing a very good job to fly the flag with it, and I think we're all feeding into them as an organisation because they are starting to be heard, but it's largely fallen on deaf ears when you look at the UK side of things.
Yeah, I suppose just following on from that then, the hospitality, how much they're relying then on industry. So that's sort of the point I was going to go on to make around our hospitality sector in the south area and benefit an awful lot from the businesses that are there and people who are coming to stay. Is that the experience in this area as well? Is that what you're seeing, and is that something that needs to amend in order to allow for greater international visitors? More?
Do you mean the supply chain? Is that what?
Yeah, and even occupancy where we see that they're relying on midweek business visitors and weddings, and then that has an impact then on the growth of hotels.
Yeah,
is that something that?
I don't know that. I don't know the specific numbers. It would be much more of a sort of gut feel, but the business stays in this area probably go largely under the radar, and again because of a large part of the businesses would be locally owned, and yes, have people coming in. I mean, there's I think Steve probably has a better idea of the ones that are flying in and flying out, maybe the multinationals, but it's not been a large part of it. Most of it's been leisure rather than business would be, but I don't know the exact facts on that.
Traditionally by air we're saying around 36% business and the remainder leisure and visit and
but which way they're going, I suppose, is the...
most people are here to do business rather than coming here to do business.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Colleagues, just given time pressure, for a few brief questions. Diana and then David. So Diana.
Yeah, very quickly. Thank you for this morning. It's been really interesting. As a family, we used to holiday in the North Coast, so when you've seen such exponential growth from that time, it was purely tourism, but you're seeing academia, research, innovation, manufacturing. Very quickly, just to ask more about potential of the offshore energy for you. How do you see the potential there for the local economy in developing offshore wind energy?
That's an interesting question, considering the last time that there was an attempt. I don't think it went very well. Honestly, I wouldn't be qualified, I don't think, to comment on the potential for offshore. I know that the onshore, in terms of solar and wind, that part of it has been growing. I don't know if you...
No, infrastructure still is an issue. The more energy capability we can get, the better. During our own expansion, both sites, knowledge, we've had blocks from either NA Water or NAE. That's been the biggest challenge of actually infrastructure growth.
And do you know, have the universities, are they moving towards those skills in renewable energy? Is there more provision of that locally?
Yeah, so there are some course provision in terms of sustainable energy. I was going to comment something like Johnson said as well. I think the challenge, most of the wind production and renewable energy production is in the west, the three counties in the west of Northern Ireland. I think the challenge is probably storage. In terms of how do you get it stored when it's been used and then to be used somewhere else. So I think hydrogen, for example, and green hydrogen has a lot to play in there. You could actually use it as a temporary storage mechanism for further up here. That's it. It's a really interesting thing in terms of what we need to do and how we can link up the grid better so that you have renewable energy where the bigger populations in the east can use better.
Thank you.
Okay, and finally, David.
Here, you've answered a lot of my stuff in the well into the quest, so I'm not going to go in very quickly. Has there been engagement on the offshore? We were briefed. There's offshore going off the shore in or one of the areas off the north coast. Has there been briefing with yourself?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Actually, so it'd be good to understand what's going on.
Definitely, because that sort of engagement at an early stage would be really useful between the department and yourselves. If that isn't happening, that will be, you don't want to cause a problem for further down the line. So that's something that we can pick up. Just very, very quickly, that you've mentioned the Dublin-Derry Airlink. Is there any stats or figures around what you'd expect to gain in tourism numbers or FDI business sort of?
There is, and it's extremely significant. I think PA, it's a minimum York Aviation, a respected company and used by DFE. There's 4 lines on the table, but the one I pick out rather than oversell it, it's a minimum of 46.5 million euros a year GDP, and obviously that's combined with tourism and FDI potential. And the demand is absolutely huge. We've done surveys on behalf of DFT in the Republic of Ireland, and 94% of people, which is unheard of, would use the route. And you're talking more than 50% for business as well, while 93% would also use it for leisure, and 40-something% for onward connectivity as well as a hub. So there's significant potential there.
Fantastic. No, that's great.
Colleagues, thank you so much for that. After this, after lunch, we're having a meeting with the college, but you'd be very welcome to join us for further discussions at lunch if you're free. I know you're all very busy people, but we'd be delighted to host you for lunch on that. Move then to anything you want to...
Sorry, in terms of actions, members who intend to write to the Department of Finance and just seek an update on the Causeway Coast and Glen City and Growth deal, and if they have any thoughts about current funding. So Department of Finance would be the owners, as members are aware, of the City and Growth deals. So if we write to them and say, look, if you go on to the City and Growth deal website, it tells you nothing about the Causeway Coast and Glens. It tells you a bit about Belfast, but really nothing about this at all. There's been no update for a few months. So we could write directly to the Department of Finance and see what's happening, particularly around the things that they mentioned, the Dungiven public realm stuff, the Cushendall, Grow the Glens bit, and the food and drug discovery, etc.
Can we write about that renewable? I'd be worried about that offshore. If there's no engagement here, you have an area of natural beauty right around that coast. I'd be concerned that will cause a problem down the line. Communication is way better at an early stage from the department.
Great. Committee content to write to the department in those terms, just indicate.
It's engagement. We're asking for engagement between the chamber or councils, or just that you don't want to cause a problem later, where you could easily, if people are informed.
It's also concerning that our 4th biggest employer in Northern Ireland has no idea what the good jobs bill is, and that no one's been in contact with them. But that's a point for further discussion at another point. Okay, are there members happy to move on to correspondence? Okay, so item 2, members, is for noting or members' content. Okay, item 3, again, members for noting on the Northwest Development Fund. Members' content? Okay. Item 4, again, for noting, members are asked to note of a summary report from the utility regulator. Members' content? Thank you. Item 5, members are asked to note an invitation to the launch of the credit union modernisation and reform bill public consultation, and are members content at the end of the consultation to have a briefing from the department?
Content.
Thank you. Item 6, members, is for noting an update on the social enterprise champions training. Members content?
Content.
Item 7 is a statement from the minister. Content to note, members?
Content.
Thank you. 322, members, are we content to note pending the introduction of the bill?
So this is about the employment bill in GB. Marie Curie have written to the committee. They note that in the GB bill there is a provision for bereavement leave, which should be unpaid, but there's nothing in the Northern Ireland bill. So what Marie Curie is suggesting is maybe the committee might want to introduce an amendment, but we haven't seen the bill yet. So maybe the committee could hold that thought until the bill appears.
What was that? Sorry, I must have...
So Marie Curie have written to say that unpaid bereavement leave is included in the GB bill, but the minister has indicated that at this stage it may not be included. But obviously we haven't seen the bill yet, so we can't comment.
Yeah, I concur until we see the bill, and when we do, I think then we could schedule Marie Curie for a briefing on that. It seems a very legitimate
Happy enough, members? Okay. Item 9 is on smart metering. Members, are we content to write again to the department to seek an update on those outstanding issues?
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 10, members are asked to consider departmental responses in relation to Northern Ireland screen. Are members content to note? Thank you. Item 11, members are asked to consider departmental response in respect of Stranmillis University. Members content to forward to the department the Committee for Education.
Content.
Thank you. Item 12, members, is in relation to disability support services. Are members content to schedule a visit in the future?
Content.
Thank you. Item 13, members are asked to note a copy of the Mineral Development of Petroleum Product Accounts 23-24. Members content?
Content.
Thank you. Item 14 is for noting members on the partnership agreement between DFE and the Consumer Council. Members content? Item 15, are members content to forward to the Department for the Economy? This is a memo from the Committee for Education in relation to our meeting on the 14th of May. Thank you. Item 16, members are asked to consider a copy of the Communities Committee correspondence to DFE on construction skills sector gap. Are members content to note?
Content.
Item 17, again for noting, members are asked to note a copy of correspondence to the Secretary of State. Members content? Thank you. Item 18, again for noting, members are asked to consider correspondence from FE lecturer in relation to pay. Members content? Thank you. Item 19, it's an invitation to myself as chair, but given that the committee is due to meet that day, are members content that I decline that invitation? Thank you. And item 20, members are asked to consider an invitation to an event that was on Monday. So just for noting, members content to do that? Okay. Board work plan, Peter.
And members, just a quick one on page 612. So next week we're opening with a briefing on social enterprises and international best practice. But then, if members are content, we'll have a briefing from basically the department counselled on me. We're going to talk about the circular economy. That's not happening. So what we've got is speakers for schools who want to come along and talk about work placements. So that members might find that kind of interesting. So if members are content to take that briefing, and then we have Dr. Jordan from QUB giving us an update on productivity and their latest report. So that's next week, if that's okay. Members looking at me very dubiously, but hopefully that's all right. Then at 1 o'clock that day, we have an informal meeting with the House of Lords International Agreements Committee. The Committee for the Executive Office are going to join us for that, so it's just informal. They'll come along. I'll give you a little pack for it. There'll be a lunch. It'll be in the private dining room, so we'll get our meeting done probably about 12:30, 12:45, and then pop up the stairs at 1 o'clock to meet with that group.
What date's that again?
Pardon?
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday.
Yep.
Wednesday 7th, yes. So shouldn't be too long. You'll be out the door before 1:45 if you're happy.
Are members, if they're not going to that, could they indicate just so that we can inform catering?
Not going? Right, okay. But it's just for the numbers and catering so we can get it all seated. Thank you. Additionally then, okay, so we're going to Enniskillen on the 4th of June. We're going to talk about a few things. Talk about alternative heat fuels with bulk gas. We also want to talk about tourism. Now, Tourism NI will come along. We're trying to get Fermanagh Lakeland Tourism to come as well, and maybe the council to show as well. The problem is Tourism Ireland not available. So are you content with that lineup, or do you want me to try and get another date? We're having a bit of trouble getting Tourism Ireland.
Just for noting, it might refer to Emma as well, but the Democratic Scrutiny Committee's in Brussels on that day, so we will. Well, I'll
That's
not.
right, yeah.
I don't know if you're attending, but we will not be able to be at both. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have went.
Yeah.
Okay, but are members content? Thanks for members for telling me that. I appreciate that. Are members content with that lineup that we wouldn't have Tourism Ireland?
I think it's a pity Tourism Ireland.
What's their reasons, given a month's notice?
They apparently have a management away day scheduled, so I could reschedule for another date, but we'd have to move everybody else around to suit them.
No, I think, the council is sufficiently over the work of Tourism Ireland, so
hopefully
we can get a
Tourism NI
briefing.
will show up anyway.
Okay.
Additionally, then, when we go to Foyle on the 25th of June, same problem. We're going to get the council and Visit Derry to come along on Tourism NI to talk about tourism, but again, Tourism Ireland not available. So if members are content with that lineup, so we'll be in Foyle Port. We'll be talking to the Tertiary Education Cluster. That's the FE College and the HE organisations both sides of the border. And the tourism bit then will be Tourism NI, Visit Derry, and the council, obviously. If that's...
Are members content we just go back to Tourism Ireland and say we're now giving them over 2 months' notice of this? Committee for the Economy, in which this department provides a huge amount of funding to their organisation, may wish to make themselves available at 2 months' notice to a meeting that we want to do.
Chair, I think look, I mean, we're a statutory committee, and I think that when we ask a body to attend an event, they need to attend it. Yeah. So I don't think it's out of the question, and I think we need to go back in a very forthright way to state that, to be honest.
Yeah. Chair, just the foil port, in terms of the agenda, have we an opportunity to hear, are we doing a tour or anything, or are we going to hear from foil port in terms of their plans, ambitions? Yeah.
That was the idea, is we would do hear about the tourism piece, hear about the tertiary education cluster tour. I'm actually having our meeting in foil port.
No, I know that, but it's just, I know they had raised, certainly with myself anyway, some issues that they wanted to raise, and obviously we'll have informal conversations, just with an opportunity to hear from them.
Do you want that?
Well, I think it's important that we do, because I think if we're going there, I know the chair has already met them previously in capacity, but I think it's important that we hear from them, not just on the tourism piece, but on the whole Freeport.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, yeah, Freeport.
Could you schedule that in?
Okay, if that's agreed.
To me, that's more important. We're there's the tertiary education stuff, which is fine, but you don't have to do that at foil port, that's my point. You know?
Yes. Okay, and then
agreed.
And then finally Queen's then.
So Queen's have. So I went to a seminar before Easter all about AI, and I'm trying to get the Chief Scientific and Technology Advisor, because she spoke at that. She was really good, and she said quite a lot about AI. Much better answer than the answers we got from the departments on this. But additionally, several people from QUB buttonholed me and said they really want to come and talk to the committee. They believe that their budget is going to be cut in order to support the increase in student places at McGee. So they're in favour of student places increasing in McGee. They just don't want their own budget cut, and they'd like to come and brief on that. But I do not know what the department's plans are in terms of its budget. I think we should know very shortly. So I had scheduled QUB for September, but they're saying no, we want to come sooner. Yeah. Chair, what should we do?
I think we should do that. We've had Ulster University and we've never had Queen's.
Yeah.
So get them in soon then. Yeah. What members?
I think it's imperative, given that these challenges they're facing. Was that particularly was that broad budget cuts right across QUB, or was that specific to the AI that you'd?
No, it wasn't specific to the AI at all. It was just that's where I met them. They recognised me. Yeah. Which is worrying.
Totally agree.
So just for clarification on that, because I did have just at the outset of that conversation a different thought on AI, which I'll come to in a minute. But who is it from QUB we're meeting?
So the Vice Chancellor wrote to me to the committee.
Okay. Second point, just on AI, to be honest, I think while the AI stuff is obviously coming at us and it's really useful, I'm just speaking from a personal point of view, I don't think that we know enough about it to ask the right questions. So rather than us having a presentation on AI, I actually think that something like I don't know if you could do like a training session or something, but I think we're all asking questions around the periphery of it because we don't know the detail of it, naturally so, because it's not our expertise. But to be honest, I think as a committee, it's going to become an increasing issue, and I actually think we need to have a proper like a full presentation, not where we're asking questions, but where it's actually fully explained and there's a bit of training for us on it.
I think we thought about a visit to QUB because they have things to show us around AI. So again, I was thinking of that for September, but we'll chat to them and see if we can sort of put all that together. So I don't know what you would see particularly, but that would give us an introduction. And then I haven't got the CSTA hold of her yet, but she was very good. She explained it.
It's just to make our questioning as kind of sharp as possible, because I just think that none of us know enough about it to be able to really go into depth on it.
Sure, if I could just on that point, I do agree with Padraig. I don't know how you would crystallise that personally into some form of course. It is so vast and so detailed.
Something like that session, I think.
It fills into actually the other point which actually Diana raised before, and I know we were tasked to do this, about renewable energies and a significant breakdown. Do we have? Maybe I've missed it.
Yeah, that's on the 20th of May. We'll have Assembly Research will come along and chat to us about that, and I'm hoping that immediately after that we'll hear from the department on the renewable renewable electricity support scheme, but let's see if that happens.
Okay, and members all
I think that's
content?
really important. Just going back to
Yeah.
what Frederick said, there is what has come up in conversations. Some of the engagements I've had is AI bias, and a lot of firms are not aware of that. You know, so it's the more we know as well. It's very important.
Members content then, as amended?
I was just going to say, Chair, I think we should, if we can, visit Queen's, because given the fact that we've been to Maguire twice, even just in terms of the perception piece, I think we should visit, and it's obviously close to hand in terms of Stormont as well.
It is. So, Chair, that was the plan, that we would visit Queen's, hear from
Sooner
them.
than September. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, members content? Okay, any other business? Members, I just want to raise one issue. Unfortunately, the wonderful Anthea has been rightly promoted and was no longer serving as the assistant clerk to this committee. Members who frequent the business office or who are unable to formulate parliamentary acceptable questions will be getting emails from Anthea, as I already have, correcting my grammar and spelling. But Anthea, you have been very great for my time on the committee, and as somebody who, first time MLA, who's gained straight into chair, you've kept me right, so thank you so much for your time, and you'll be greatly missed by the committee.
Agreed.
Congratulations.
Will you miss us?
Yes, I will.
Sounds like we're adjourned.
Yeah, and we adjourn, members.
I thought the